Joseph from Port St. Lucie, Florida. I was thinking about why Leon Ruff would win the NXT North American title besides the shock value of the moment. I think the plan is for Pat McAfee to beat Leon Ruff to become North American champion. And for Pete Dunne to challenge and win the NXT title from Finn Balor so they can hold all the gold, just like Undisputed Era did. It seems the booking of McAfee's group is mirroring the UE, since they are currently feuding. Do you think this is the plan? And if not, what do you think about it? I could see McAfee winning the North American title, and he'll be even more insufferable. He can throw that in people's face. Look, I have a belt now. I'm a champion. He loves to talk about the internet wrestling community. All you marks, look at me now. You know, I've got a belt, and I've been talking about wanting to see Pete Dunne go on to challenge Balor for the championship. So that's a match I've already advocated for. If they want to go the route of having all of them hold gold, then somebody's got to win the North American title. Unless they bring in another member, that somebody would have to be Pat McAfee. And Leon Ruff is somebody who, I mean, all due respect to Leon Ruff, you know, he's I know, well-regarded and he's very good, but if Pat McAfee is going to go in there and beat anybody, I'd rather it be somebody like Leon Ruff and not Damian Priest. So yeah, I think there actually is a very high probability that that happens. Howard from Queens, New York. If The Undertaker had stayed heel in that segment on the funeral parlor with Jake Roberts in 1992, and Jake had asked him as to which side are you on, and Undertaker replied, not yours, and the crowd erupted in cheers, would you have kept him as a heel, and what would you have done with the match between him and Jake at WrestleMania 8? So I think the question might have been phrased a little awkwardly, but I think the question is, had he just not gone babyface in 92? If he didn't, then I don't think we get the match. There is no Undertaker-Jake match if Undertaker doesn't go babyface. But the people loved The Undertaker. They were cheering him in a lot of cases back then, so it was the right time to do the turn. People, they loved the gimmick. What's not to love? The guy barely sold. He can get beaten up and keep coming back. He won most of his matches. Very rarely did he lose. He looked pretty badass coming down to the ring. I mean, what's not to cheer for? So they made the right move. But had they kept him heel, we wouldn't have gotten that match. As far as what the other match would have been, if the WrestleMania 8 card had gone a little bit differently, I think the top matches should have been Hogan Flair. That was the match that they should have done. Hulk Hogan against Ric Flair for the championship. They couldn't because Hogan was leaving after WrestleMania, and Hogan was not going to lose. Hogan never lost. Hulk Hogan never lost. Even the countout wins that Ric Flair, or the bullshit like dusty finishes they did with Flair going over on Hogan, like they were always reversed. And even in WCW, like Flair was always the whipping boy for Hogan, so he certainly was not beating Hogan in Mania. But if Hogan was staying, Hogan Flair for the title, Savage against Jake, and once they knew Jake was leaving, they could have made it loser leaves town. The company's not big enough for the both of them, so that could have been the big blow off to their feud. And I would have done Sid justice if you wanted to keep the Undertaker heel. There's your match. Sid one-on-one against Undertaker. That's your 1, 2, 3 right there. And then you flesh out the rest of the card, Piper and Brett, like they did for the Intercontinental title. If Marty Jannetty never got fired, it almost certainly would have been Jannetty and Shawn Michaels instead of Shawn Michaels and El Matador. That would have been a hell of a card. Michaels and Jannetty, Brett and Piper, Undertaker and Sid, that would have been, I mean, that would have been whatever it was, but that would have been the WrestleMania 8 card from my view. And Steve from Chester, UK. If Shawn Michaels had stayed retired in 1998, what do you think his legacy would be? Still one of the greatest, or one of the great what could have beens? I think he still would have gone down as one of the greatest. It definitely would have brought him down several notches. I still think he probably would have made it in there as one of the greats. Because look, I mean, he had two of the best matches in the history of that company. In 94 and 97, the latter match of WrestleMania 10, it being WrestleMania, that match is always going to be remembered. I mean, the match is still talked about today. Here we are, 26 years later. We're still talking about it. It's still in all the highlight reels and the highlight packages. And then you throw in the Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, which I still think is the best of all the Hell in a Cell matches they've done. That is one of the greatest matches in the history of that company. It's a fantastic match. He had a lot of classic bouts with different people in 96. So I think it would have been a little bit of both, because he did get cut down in the prime of his career, his athletic prime. He still had many more good years left in him before the back injury took him out for those 4.5 years. So I think he would have been both. He would have been one of the greats in that company who is remembered. He wouldn't have been on anyone's Mount Rushmore, I don't think, but or not too many people's. But I think there would have always been this cloud. Two reasons that there would have been this cloud hanging over him. For one, you would have had the issue of, okay, he got cut down in the physical prime of his career. So he had many more good years and many more classic matches left that we were now deprived of, right? That never happened. It's what if. What if he faced this guy? What if he faced that guy? But on top of that, he had a terrible reputation. And that might not matter to some people. Oh, I don't care about the backstage stuff. I only care about him as an in-ring performer. But to a lot of people, especially in the wrestling business, it does matter. And he had a horrible reputation. He had a horrible reputation for just being an insufferable prick who was difficult to work with, who wouldn't put certain people over, and he was a giant headache, and he was a mess at that point. And that would have followed him around, and he never would have had the opportunity to really repair his reputation. That second run that he had, it's like the tale of two careers. That second run is what cemented him as one of the all-time greats. He's still great without it, but I don't think he's one of the all-time greats necessarily without it. And you might have some people who say, well, what about Bret Hart? Isn't Bret Hart the same thing? Bret Hart got cut down due to injury, and Bret Hart, could have had this whole second run had he come back to WWE, and he never did. It's a little bit different just because I think when Bret got cut down due to injury, it was years later. By that point, he was well into his early to mid-40s, probably. Shawn Michaels was a lot younger when he went down with the back injury in 98. So Bret, by that point, he had been older and he had been wrestling a little bit longer. I mean, I guess there are similarities there, but again, his reputation, Shawn's reputation, was not a very positive one. And I think in the eyes of a lot of people, that would have affected their viewpoint about him. But that second run, it cemented him. Think of all the great matches, the WrestleMania classics, the programs he had with Triple H, with Kurt Angle, with Chris Jericho, with Randy Orton, with The Undertaker, the WrestleMania 25 match, which I think is the greatest match in WrestleMania history. That doesn't happen if he doesn't come back. So I put it in this perspective. The second run did two key things. It showed that as he got older, he didn't get worse. He actually got better in a lot of ways. He improved because he had to adapt. Okay, I can't do some of the things that I used to do. And maybe I'm not quite as fast as I was in 96 or in 97. You go back and watch some of those matches he had in 97 when like he came back from the knee injury and he was doing tag stuff with like Austin. The way he was flying around that ring just when he would hit the ropes. This guy was flying around that ring. He was as good as anybody in the wrestling business. So yeah, now he's older and he may have lost a few steps, but he found a way to adapt and actually become better. Became a better worker as he aged and as he got older. And that, I think, is the hallmark of someone who is a great performer. But it also served another purpose, which was it changed people's viewpoint about Shawn Michaels. Changed their views of him. He wasn't just some cocky young pain in the ass who was selfish, who had addiction problems, who refused to lay down and do business, when business needed to be done. It changed that. Changed the whole narrative about Shawn Michaels. The second run rehabilitated his image from the first. So that only enhances his legacy. So yeah, I still think he'd be remembered as, oh, you remember that guy? He was great. But you know what? One of the all-time greats? Probably not. Probably not without the benefit of that second run.